Two buyers fighting desperately for the same house.
We think it's the right thing, the responsible thing, to now open talks on exactly the same basis as we've been having with the Conservative Party, with the Labour Party, whilst of course continuing our discussions with the Conservatives. Gordon Brown has made an important announcement today. It must have been a very difficult thing for him to say personally, but I think he's taken it in the national interest. And I think his announcement could be an important element in the smooth transition towards a stable government that people deserve.
So when David Cameron met his MPs in the Commons at 6 o'clock, he knew he had to improve his offer to the Lib Dems. And to the dismay of many backbenchers who remained quiet, he did so.
What it appears is that the Conservatives are willing to offer the Liberal Democrats a referendum on the alternative voting system. That's not the same as proportional representation, but it would mean, in some people's eyes, a slightly fairer distribution of seats. And of course, it's what Gordon Brown was offering before the election.
In the interests of trying to create a stable, secure government, we will go the extra mile, and we will offer to the Liberal Democrats in a coalition government the holding of a referendum on the alternative vote system.
So we're moving towards a Conservative Liberal Democrat coalition?
Well, that's a matter for my colleagues later on when we meet later on. We're meeting again this evening. We do want to get a move on with this, and we'll try to reach a resolution, I'm sure.
But it's not full-blooded PR, is it? AV. In fact, for some ways, it can be less proportional.
Well, AV is not it's no secret that our preferred system is STV. But obviously, we've had an offer, and we'll consider it.
Tonight, Labour held talks with the Lib Dems at the Commons, and afterwards the School Secretary Ed Balls called them positive and constructive. Labour's trying to trump the Conservatives by pledging AV without a referendum, and also a referendum on the kind of proportional voting system that the Lib Dems really prefer.
And Michael Crick joins us now from Downing Street. First of all, how has Cameron managed to keep the Conservative right on board throughout all this?
Well, that's the fascinating question. Basically, David Cameron today, in order to get into the door here in Downing Street, has had to make offers not just to the Liberal Democrats, but as I understand it, to the right of his party. There will have been MPs who have had serious misgivings about this concession on AV, the AV referendum, and also serious misgivings about any kind of coalition agreement with the Liberal Democrats. Well, as I understand it tonight, the promise is more Conservative cabinet posts for prominent right-wingers. And the names that I'm hearing tonight are David Davis. That must have been a difficult one for David Cameron to swallow, given Mr Davis's resignation a year or two ago. And the former leaders, Michael Howard and Ian Duncan Smith.
And in your view, could a Lib-Lab pact actually work?
Well, I'm pretty sceptical about that. A lot of people in politics are. A lot of people, frankly, in the Labour Party are. First of all, look at the figures. They don't add up. Labour has got 258 seats, the Liberal Democrats 57. Adding those together, you only reach 315. That's 8 short of the majority, the finishing line. So they'd have to bring in other parties as well. The SDLP from Northern Ireland, that wouldn't be much of a problem, but they also Plaid Cymru, maybe the SNP, 1 or 2 other MPs. It would be a very unstable coalition. And of course, you'd only just get a majority even then. And of course, that's assuming that all the backbenchers remain totally obedient and loyal. And we've seen what problems Gordon Brown's had with his backbenchers over the last 3 years. And of course, come the by-election or whatever, it would run into problems. And then, of course, there's the problem of having a second unelected by the public leader, Prime Minister. And on top of that, there's huge scepticism about whether Gordon Brown or his successor can really deliver on these promises on AV and a more proportional voting system. Would the PLP be willing to agree to, the Parliamentary Labour Party be willing to agree to AV without a referendum, or even to a referendum on a system like STV? So I think it is a pretty understandable scepticism about whether this would work.
Michael, thank you very much. Well, as it happens, the Labour Deputy Leader, Harriet Harman, has just been in negotiations with the Liberal Democrats this evening. She joins us now. Do you think you've done enough tonight to get the Liberal Democrats to sign up?
Well, it's not about getting the Liberal Democrats to sign up. It's about saying, bearing in mind the public haven't voted for any one party to have an overall majority and go straight into majority government, what is the best thing in the public interest for us to do to make sure that we play our part to have a stable and secure government?
And if that means ditching your manifesto commitment to a referendum on electoral reform as an AV, you've just done it. You've just ditched it and you've told the Liberal Democrats you'll go one better than the Tories and you'll produce a bill.
Well, obviously, in discussions, if you're going to have a partnership arrangement rather than just delivery of your own manifesto, you have to compromise and discuss things. But I do think that this suggestion is really a Conservative scare story. The idea that somehow we've gone into negotiations and have immediately ditched the idea that there would be a referendum, and without actually wanting to disclose what's been discussed. Perhaps I could just draw people's attention back to what our manifesto said, which was that we support the idea of changing the voting system to an AV, but we think it should not happen without a referendum.
And you stand by that?
But we obviously have to discuss these things not only with the Liberal Democrats, but with also the National Executive Committee of the Labour Party and the Parliamentary Labour Party. But what we've got to do is, sooner rather than later, we need a government, a new government, to take the country forward.
Was the continuation of Gordon Brown in Downing Street a deal breaker?
Well, I think Gordon took the view that he needed to take some responsibility for the election result, that actually it would pave the way more easily to a partnership agreement if he stepped down.
And he was never going to be able to work with Nick Clegg.
I don't think that's the point. I think he felt it was in the public interest for him to step aside, and I think we should pay credit to him for doing that.
The Liberal Democrats seem to suggest it was a deal breaker.
Well, that might be their view about what they wanted to do by way of an agreement, but that's neither here nor there, because before the discussions have even started, Gordon Brown himself has said that he's stepping aside.
And it's the best thing for the party and the country, is it, that he steps aside?
Well, yes, it is, I think, and he's made that clear, and I think we should pay credit to him for that.
Will the Liberal Democrats take any Labour leader, do you think?
Well, I think that it's not a question of the Liberal Democrats choosing the Labour leader. I think Gordon Brown stood aside.
Will they take any Labour leader?
Well, we haven't got into that question. The question of who is the Labour leader is for the NEC to actually set the timetable and the processes, and for the Labour Party to actually decide on that. But I think at the moment we're trying to form a government after a general election, and we haven't set the timetable for the leadership election yet.
Are you going to stand?
I'm deputy leader of the Labour Party, and I've got no plans to step aside from that role.
So that means you're not standing for leader?
No, I'm staying as deputy leader.
So you're not.
My plan.
I just want to be absolutely clear at this. You're not standing.
You can't run for leader at the same time as being deputy leader.
So there's no circumstance in which you will actually resign deputy leader in order to stand?
It's my plan to stay deputy leader.
In that case,
I think
will
that's
you be
the best
supporting
thing for stability?
David Miliband? Will you be supporting Ed Balls? Who will you support?
Well, I think to stay on as deputy would be invidious to actually get into backing one or another candidate. But actually, at the moment, I don't think anybody is declaring themselves as a candidate, because what we need to do is make sure that we've got a new government for Britain. And actually, that's the most immediate priority.
But you must have heard John Reid say quite categorically, this is just clinging on to power at any price. And it's undignified apart from anything else.
It's not clinging on to power. Gordon Brown has actually stepped aside.
No, Labour trying to cling on to power, not Gordon Brown, clearly.
No, it's what we're saying is we're prepared to play our part, and if we can be part of a partnership government, then so be it. In the public interest, we'll do that. We recognise that we didn't win the election. That is self-evident, that's obvious, but we need to play our part as parliamentarians to form a new government.
Now, one of the key economic planks of the Liberal Democrat offer at the election was no tax no income tax for those earning less than £10,000. Do you rule that out as a possible offer?
Well, we've already, over the years, increased the threshold at which you start paying tax. And obviously, these sorts of issues will have to be discussed.
But that is a key policy. I'm asking you, because I'm going on to do another interview in a second, I'm asking you, do you rule out no income tax for under £10,000 a year?
Well, obviously you don't go into discussions ruling in or ruling out anything. I've said it's not a matter of principle. We obviously want to help people on lower income, and we've, over the years ourselves, lightened the burden of tax on those on lower income by raising the tax threshold.
Harriet Harman, thank you very much indeed. Now I can be joined from Westminster by Michael Gove, who's part of the other negotiating team. You've been listening carefully. You're not part of the negotiating team, you're close to the negotiating team, I should say. If there's a referendum on AV, just if there is a deal done between the Conservatives and the Liberal Democrats, and there's a referendum on AV, which way would you campaign? For AV or against it?
Well, at the moment we know there's a free